Hello. So before we begin, I want to say that this tier list is actually super hard to make. The thing about egos, right, is that sometimes in the right situations, an ego may flourish, and in the wrong situation, it will just be not used at all. You will never consider using this ego. So it's a very situational tier list. You need to consider things like, I'm going to fight this boss, he's weak to this element. Do I have the resources carried over from the start? The team comps that I'm running for this dungeon, do they generate the right resources for these egos that I'm going to use later? And if not, what are other alternatives I can consider? There's a lot of things to consider when you're doing egos. So there are some very amazing egos, and then there are the rest, which sometimes may be used and sometimes may not be used. So it's very difficult, and I'm sure there will be situations where this tier list is just irrelevant. I'm basing this off of Railway 1. So in the future, if the enemy typings or weaknesses are different from Railway 1, we will see a huge shift in this tier list. But I do want to point out the ones that look like they have good value, and the ones that either competing with the good value or they are kind of a bit of a waste of resources. Yeah, so let's start off with the generic ones first. So generic one would be Lantern, Sangre de Sancho, Branch of Knowledge, Suddenly One Day, Roseate Desire Honglu, and Telepole Faust. Telepole Faust. Yep. So these 6 here are some of the weaker egos in my opinion. And you can say that yes, if the typings are good, right, then I don't mind using these resources. But in that situation, right, the units that you bring in, they need to support these. And also you will probably be bringing characters that have the right typings, the right elements to beat these enemies. So you need to make sure that these egos are worth it rather than using another good move from your character, because it does take a turn to cast these. Which is why I think sometimes, in most situations, you will not be using these egos over the character's base kit. And let's start with Lantern, right? So what does Lantern actually do? So Lantern is Piercing and Gluttony, if I remember correctly. Yeah, it is Piercing, Gluttony. And the thing about this is that if you're running G Gregor, you could just use this, but it takes Gluttony and Sloth. And what else takes Gluttony and Sloth is Legerdemain. And Legerdemain is really damn good for a really cheap cost. So you can argue that yes, if the enemy is weak to Pierce and Gluttony, then this is a huge amount of damage. But also the other effects, such as the on hit is like heal 60%. It's Gregor. He's generally very healthy. G Gregor heals himself. Base Gregor heals himself. Chef Gregor heals himself. I think only the Liu section Gregor does not heal himself. And after you defeat an enemy that has Rupture, you heal. Like, I don't need healing most of the time. I'm trying to kill things, whether it be farming, MD, or Refraction Railway. Sometimes healing is good, but not always. And I do not want to be paying resources to heal either. The thing is, I rather pay resources to do a lot of damage. And this one, it may have the right damage sometimes, but this is relatively low for a pretty high cost here. 16 plus 8. If I look at Legerdemain, right? Legerdemain is 18 plus 5. That is 23. 23 versus 24. Like, okay, if the typing is different, then yeah, but Legerdemain already has a higher base damage than this guy, so really hard to justify wasting resources on this when you could be using Legerdemain if the enemy was normal resistant. Yeah, real tricky lah. It's real tricky. Like, there could be situations where it's okay, but most of the time it's not going to be okay. It's like, why not just save it for something else in the future? So that argument, right, applies for quite a lot of egos actually. So if you look at Sangre de Sancho, Sangre de Sancho is a Zayn, so it will be and it's on Don. So competing with Don, right, is Telepole. Telepole is something that a lot of people use. Wrath, Gloom, Envy. Wrath, Gloom, Envy. This takes Lust and Pride, so it doesn't compete with that one. Competes here with Fluid Sac, which is pretty damn decent for single target damage, so it's pretty hard to justify that. And uses Lust as well, which is also a pretty solid one. 21 plus 4, and then it gets more damage if you have more Lust. So really tricky to justify using this one either, because the passive is not something that's really amazing. Like gaining haste is good if you want to get something like maybe Shidon's skill tree to activate, but otherwise not really very good. I would not be paying this cost here, these energies, for this. If I was going for maybe last build, I would go for the other one, the chef one. And this pride is useful for many other egos as well, so it's quite tricky to justify this one for the little amount of value it gives you. Branch of Knowledge. Branch of Knowledge is interesting because I do foresee somewhat a use for it to stack a bunch of Rupture when we start getting the Rupture counts. But at its current state, this passive is just like, why does this passive exist? At the start of the combat phase, you gain attack power, and then next turn you gain that much attack power down. And this effect does not activate. So every now and then, you will lose power. It's because he's unstable, right? He has to choose between the Sinclair form and the base Claire form. So, I mean, lore-wise it's great, but actuality, like, look at this shit over here. This guy is actually gimping himself. He does a lot of damage. 29 is really high at the max. And I count it as 29 because at max sanity, which you want to be when you use this ego, you will be getting the 29 95% of the time. So that's why I'm using the max value. And this attack power down stuff here is just dumb. It's just dumb. This ego is just detrimental if you're not going to use this ego again. But I will say, the hit inflictor of Rupture, I do see a use for it in stacking Rupture for maybe what's his face, Yisang's ego, and the Dimension Cutter ego. I do see this as having some use in the future for quick stacking, but at the same time there might be better IDs, so we may not even use this. It's just I'd rather not waste resources on this. Okay, and then we look at Suddenly One Day. Suddenly One Day suffers a different problem from Lantern in that it's fighting with this guy for this slot. So did I say more, really? Like, this gives protection if you're below 25% and heals you. A random other ally uses 15 SP, you inflict 6 random statuses and roll 28. Probably not worth it, man. Probably not worth it. Legerdemain is just too good. I think I just leave the argument at that. Good passive, good damage, AoE, Paralyze, Burst Tremor, only cost 4. A 4 cost AoE, yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna leave it at that. And then we look at Roseate Desire, Honglu. Roseate Desire, Honglu is actually not too bad if you just want to clash things. It's just that it consumes 4 Lust and 2 Envy. So that's a 6 cost for about 28 damage. That's not too bad. Status wise is pretty bad. So defense level down is pretty okay because it's a percentage down, I believe. Defense power down is not okay as of now because there are no enemies with really high defensive skills where this would actually have an effect. So what defense power down does is that it actually reduces the power of the defense move. So if Chroma was dodging and you have this status on her, it will trigger and then she will lose that amount of power on that defense. And then his passive is he will apply Lust Fragility, but I don't know. It's Lust Resonance 4, by the way. It's really hard to get this. And even if you do get this, it's 1. It's a value of 1. Like, this is ridiculously hard to get. So I don't like this passive at all. I think defense level down is okay. I think for clashing purposes it's fine, but I think there are better things to be using these resources on. Because Envy plus Lust equal Body Sack. So there is better things to use this on. If you have access, Lust and Envy, sure. But use Body Sack. Okay. And then lastly we got Telepole Faust. Telepole Faust loses because of 2 reasons. Telepole Faust is supposed to synergize with Charge. And the only charge character we have is W Faust. W Faust is not exactly a DPS. I put her in the support tank section of the previous tier list. And she really is just a tank support-ish character. Like the rolls are fine, the growth is really bad for clashing, but her damage output is not as amazing as other units that you bring. Especially since you're competing with with N-Corp Faust in the same slot. Like, L-Corp Faust and the One Who Grips are extremely good IDs. So is it worth it to take Telepole just to buff this one? Probably not. Telepole is actually really good, by the way. It's actually pretty damn good. 22 plus 6 with a 6 cost in total. Not bad. And then we have the charge, deal 2% damage per charge count, and skill spend -2. If the W Corp ID was way better, I would say that this would be a very good ego, but it struggles because the W Corp ID is not very good for damage. And it does not help farming, it does not help MD runs, it does not help with Refraction Railway. So I do not like this ego at all because of the ID. If the ID was way better, it had a lot of damage and it uses charge count. Wow, this one's really up there with Telepole Don. It's going to fight for that spot as well. So yeah, really strong ego, wrong ID. So that's unfortunate. So I would not be spending these resources, especially since these 2 resources here are for body sack and ref can be used for like what Ryoshu, Yisang, Rodion, all the ref egos. Yeah, it's just unfortunate, really. It's unfortunate. Yeah, and furthermore, it fights with Fluid Sac, and Fluid Sac is a 5 AOE that does blunt and heals SP. So really a lot of value you get from this one compared to the other one. It also uses Envy and Lust. So again, resources, right? You don't want to be consuming the same resources. Otherwise, you don't have enough to go around. Okay, so that is that for the generics. Really, only these 6 I could identify as being very generic, because I would rather use something else rather than these guys, but these guys I could still use if I just want to win the clash, because that's how egos are, right? If you win the clash, it's still good, so you can just use them to win the clash. But these egos are actively like, they're just a waste of resources in actual Refraction Railways and actual MD runs. In fact, even in ND, right, we don't usually use egos because we don't want to waste time with the animations and such. So I shouldn't even be talking about MD. But MD2 coming, so I'm giving a little bit of hope that we will need to use some brain power and some egos. Alright, anyway, let's move on with this. Let's go to the good value ones. So the good value ones, right, are egos that actually have a really good effect. Sorry, not really good, maybe just a good effect, just a bit trickier to justify them as well. They are good, they actually do have some game-changing impacts. It's just they're not as great as the ones after it. It could be because of cost, it could be because of power, it could be because of the setup required. There's a lot of things to consider here. So it's gonna be, you want to get Beat, followed by Lifetime Stew Dawn, followed by What is Cast, Forest of Flame, Roseate Desire Ishmael, and Snagharpoon. Roseate Desire Ishmael and Snagharpoon. Where is Snagharpoon? Snagharpoon? There you are. Okay. So these are the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yep, 9 of these egos are the ones that I consider good. They have uses, sometimes not the best use of the energy, but when they do have an impact, I feel like they actually are quite significant. So we look at Hex Nail Faust first. So Hex Nail Faust is a bit of a 2 reasons why I kind of put her here. Hex Nail has this passive here, plus 10% damage for every negative status effect on this unit. I have a little bit of hope, right, that in the future there will be a unit that will benefit from this greatly. I feel like this ego is designed for someone in the future. Maybe like when Faust is pretending to be the bear that hugs or something, an ID along those lines. Because like this is quite a lot of damage for every negative status effect on this unit. And one thing I remember now is that when I saw Sinclair, right, I realized that Paralyze was a negative status, but it benefited him because it makes you not roll hits. So maybe this one just needs to go onto a Tail Faust, and then it will have a lot of value. If Tail Faust just generates Paralyze on her, and she always wants to roll tails, then it's just free value. So I have really high hopes of this one. And besides that, not just because of this passive, it has Pierce Fragility and Envy Fragility. And that is really good. Unfortunately, it is on the same turn, so it's going to be a bit trickier. The good news is that we got L Faust and we got N Faust, both of which have really high speeds. I do not remember the speed numbers, but I believe they go up to 8. so it's on the higher end of speeds. So it's actually really good. Curse is okay. Curse is defense power down, offense level down, defense level down, and attack power down. Attack power down and defense level down are not bad because they reduce the enemy's ability to clash, and defense level down will reduce the enemy's defense, so you will do a little bit more damage, if I remember the calculations correctly. I think it's like if your offense level is higher than the enemy by a certain amount, it will just give you a little bit more damage when you hit them. So 2 out of 4 of these are really, really good, but the rest are kind of like, it's whatever statuses. If it happens, it happens. But the real one is actually this Pierce Fragility and Envy Fragility. Another good point here is that if you corrode this, right, you get more Envy Frag and 1 Pierce Frag instead. So in case you were running like Rip Space, because Rip Space would benefit more from this one rather than this one, because Rip Space is a slash move, but it's also an envy move. So if you do this one, Rip Space gets more benefit. So it's just a small little thing to take note of, especially now that we have overclocks, so we can purposely choose to overclock this one. Yep, so it's pretty interesting, this ego. I think in our current state, right, we don't really use this ego for any speedrunning. Maybe I could be wrong. I do not know if any runs actually use this ego. I just feel like there's a lot of potential here in terms of speedrunning. So I put her really high here on this list. I don't put her here yet because I think the ID is not here yet, so it might be a big hope to throw her any higher than she is already. But yeah, I think she's just fine where she is. Yep. So next one is Sunyata. Sunyata kind of the same actually. Sunyata is quite decent, gives you decent value. So at the start of the turn, you gain 1 last damage up, gain 1 more when below 0 SP. Almost the same. You want to be below 0 SP, which means a tail unit, a tail ID in the future would benefit from this one. That's really good. The problem is that here is a bit of the weird one where if you attack, you heal 18 SP. So what I think is going to happen, right, is that you get an ID for this that will benefit from tails, and you never use this, you only corrode. And the corrosion is not bad, because let's assume that you're a tails unit, you get 25. After attack, you apply 1 attack power up, good. On hit, last frag, good. On hit, inflict 2 fragile, good. Tail hit, you gain 2 fragile, but whatever really, like whatever. You gain the fragile, but the enemy gets 2 fragile. And we know the value of fragile, it's really, really good. So, I think Sunyata has a lot of potential again for another tail Otis. And the base form is unfortunately not super amazing, but I really love the corroded form. So I think one ID is coming out soon that will benefit from this. I can't wait to see that ID, so I put it pretty decently. But in terms of whether you want to just use this over other egos, not so high. Not so high right now. Not so high right now, but in the future maybe. Just a bit of cope. And then we got Sac Don. Let's go to that one. Sac Don, here you are. Sac Don has a problem. It exists on the same rarity as Telepole Don. Yep, that's it. It exists on the same level as Telepole Don, and so it is harder to justify bringing this guy. So 20 plus 18 is respectable damage. 38 is really high for a 7 cost ego. Really good. You cost 20 SP, sure. You burst Tremor, you deal 25 SP damage, and if the target is staggered, or whatever, any of these statuses, you deal 30% more damage. More damage is great, because it helps you speedrun. And then here we got a pretty okay passive, I think. The target of the rightmost skill on the dashboard loses SP by 2 times Gloom Resonance after the attack. And the manatees take Gloom damage instead. When it's just like free, you know. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. It's just free damage. And then we look at the corroded one, it's 42. Yeah, I mean, this one's harder to say anything about. I think this ego is mostly used for this one. This part is a bit trickier to say because it's actually no, it's if not staggered, low morale or panic. I feel like there might be enemies where you would want to corrode this thing purposefully and hit them. Interesting. I mean, okay, once again, the main problem is that this ego just has to compete with Telepole Don, and we know how Telepole Don be, right? It's very important for W Corp Don, so most of the time you will not be running Fluid Sac. Yeah, which is unfortunate, really. I don't think I have much else to say about that ego. I think right now, because Telepole Don is really important for W Don, you will not run Fluid Sac Don, but I feel like that might be an enemy typing in the future. Weak to blunt, weak to gloom, and then you just pop it, boom, explosion. Then we got you want to get beat Hurtily. When I looked at this ego at the start, I think I rated it quite high. Over time, I realized that it's not. It just takes too long, and Massault doesn't have an ID that is really all about doing a bunch of damage. So I talked about how this ego would do a lot of surgery. You just keep stacking surgery on this ego. It has pretty good base power, gives you protection. It has Fervent Beats as a passive. Fervent Beats is from Ruina. It basically gives you a bunch of stats: attack, defense, haste, but then you die in 3 turns. Yeah, it's exactly the same as in Ruina. So it's really powerful to get this thing. And in addition, surgery is actually really strong because each count is 20% more damage, but you do lose 20% of your health. The thing is that there is no situation where I want to spend this huge amount of energy to get my surgery that high, unless I can get surgery to transfer over turns. If I can like carry over the surgery count, then I don't have to build it up every turn. It might be pretty interesting. Or we get a very, very busted Massault ID, and then we want to pump his damage up to a ridiculous level with maybe like corroding this twice. Then we get 4 surgery, and then we just kill the guy within maybe 4 turns, 5 turns. Something along those lines could happen in the future, but right now, nothing like that. I want to mention that this ego actually is special because if you corrode, you can target. So it actually is kind of designed to be a buff. You want to corrode all the time, so you can stack surgery more, and then you get a lot of damage, and you get less HP. And when you get less HP, right, you just trigger this ego again at 25% or less because your max HP got reduced, so your 25% is a lot easier to get to, and then you get that huge amount of damage bonus, and then you win. So that's the idea I think they had in mind. The problem is the cost is quite expensive, so really hard to get to that ideal situation. I like the idea. We don't have an ID that supports this, I think, as of now, so a bit trickier to say this one is good or not. So I would say it's probably something you don't want to invest resources in. Pride, Envy, Sloth, quite important resources for a lot of other egos. Then we got Lifetime Dawn. Lifetime Dawn is one of the more interesting ones. It's because it's a lust synergy. Lifetime Stew is meant to convert resources into lust resources, consumes only lust, and boosts damage based on lust. So it's a very, very interesting ego that only wants lust. And the good news is that the NCOP gang also creates a lot of lust. So I think that this has potential in Mirror Dungeon, because Mirror Dungeon might have something that helps to boost lust damage, or gives you bonuses if you do lust damage. So I think there's some synergy there where you can actually cook, literally cook with Lifetime Stew and do a lot of damage with it. But that is unfortunately all I've got for this ego. In most situations, you probably don't want to be spending all of your lust. You also don't want to convert important resources in Refraction Railway for more lust. So my only theory here is that Mirror Dungeon 2, we might be able to synergize this with something else, and we can run a lust NCOP team as like some sort of roleplay or something. But I think it'd be quite fun to try that. Yeah, besides that, there's really nothing much else to talk about this ego. This ego is really just damage, good damage. Needs a lot of lust resources to hit the maximum damage. Yeah. Another interesting thing is that it applies 3 burn count, and that could be the only source of burn count you would need for the entire run, because burn, you know how it works. It's at the end of your turn, you take the damage of the burn and then you reduce it by 1. So if with 3, right, you only need to apply this every 2 turns. After every 2 turns, yeah. And then you just reset the burn every now and then. So actually, this ego, funnily enough, can just be the only burn count source you need, because that's enough, you know, that's enough. Yeah, so besides that, we go to Ryoshu. Ryoshu, Forest of the Flames. Forest for the Flames, yeah. So the passive is great. You gain slash damage up and fragility by Wrath Resistance Distant. When it happens, and it's nice. Inflict 6 burn and inflict 1 fragile. Good clash. So the reason why this one is kind of up here is because for 4 costs, right, I'm getting a pretty decent amount of stuff here. Fragile next turn, I mean, we all know how important Fragile is. Getting some slash damage too is not too bad. And inflicting 6 burn is just free damage, you know, so this ego is pretty damn solid for what it does. It's not like, oh, I'm going to be very afraid to use this ego. No, I don't mind just egoing it if I actually do have a chance of getting this rough resonance, or if I want to apply one more fragile next turn and I have spare resources. Because it's relatively cheap, it's only 4. Yeah, it's pretty good actually, pretty good value. So I like this ego a lot, I put it here. What is cast? I have a soft spot for what is cast because of one of its passives, and also that it helped me with the K Corpers. 15 plus 13, so that is 28. That's pretty high, right? If target's HP is above 50%, you deal 30% damage. This one is very, very good because it is just free damage. Yep, free damage is just so good for speedrunning, for refraction weary, for farming. And at the start of your turn, you gain 1 slash damage up. This is free. This is just free slash damage. And you lose 10 SP whenever a unit on the other side dies. But that doesn't really matter because when the unit dies, it gives back SP. And when you win a clash, you gain SP anyway. So it's net positive. It's not like Sinclair, right? Sinclair has a passive that specifically says, I will halve my SP gain. This one is more like, I will lose whenever a unit dies. So in this situation, you would need to do a lot to somehow lose SP on Rodion, compared to Sinclair, who will still lose SP because his passive is restricting him from gaining SP. Yeah, so overall, really high damage. If the typings match, right, this is very cheap. And it's great for spamming. Yeah, I use this to clear K-Corp because K-Corp weak to Pride, weak to Slash, so it was just huge amounts of damage. Alright, next one is Roseate Desire Ishmael. Okay, so the last two for Ishmael is interesting because the two of them are actually speed manipulation. On Clash Win with pink ribbons, Roseate Desire, you apply pink ribbons. It's a bit confusing, but the passive is pink ribbons and the status is also called pink ribbons. And there's another status called pink ribbons, but this pink ribbons is for this ego's pink ribbons, okay? It's not the other shoe abnormality that we fight sometimes, the robot that asks you to wear the shoes. It's not that one, it's this one, alright? This pink ribbons is for this pink ribbons. Alright, so what it does, right, is that the count increases by 1 whenever the affected unit attacks, and then at the end of your turn, you inflict bind. It is a lot of bind. A shit ton of bind if you apply onto a boss. So my theory here is that there might be a speedy bastard in the future with maybe 10 speed or something along those lines, and we will be able to use this ego here to control him, pull him back down to 1, and then we just beat the shit out of him. But that is a theory. Furthermore, that this ego is negative coin based here, and the corroded version is the one with +9 here. The good news is that it targets unit with higher speed. So once again, the theory comes again, right? If you want to target the rearmost, you use the base, and if you want to target the unit with the highest speed, you just corrode it. You don't even need the resources because the indiscriminate, right, will just target the highest speed. And then it will inflict paralyze, bind, offense level down. It's like, so it's quite good utility. I like this a lot, but the situation hasn't occurred yet. We haven't seen a boss with really high speed yet. So we cannot say that this ego is very good yet. Yeah, so I put it here because I have hope for it. A lot of these egos here, right, I just have hope. It's just hope or it's just cheap. Yeah, so that's why I put them here. Because there's no situation right now where I can justify saying, yes, this is clearly better than another ego. No. This ego has a use. It's just not here yet. Okay, and then we look at Snagharpoon. Snagharpoon, same situation actually. Targets rearmost. Consumes Wrath Bloom, relatively cheap, good passive. This passive is actually amazing. It gives you Crash Power +2 if the win rate is in this unit's favor. Something to note is that neutral counts as your favor for some reason. So it is just, most situations you will get this +2. It's really good. Furthermore, high base power, good. Actually, base power nowadays doesn't really matter too much because you're usually at 95% sanity unless you're Sinclair, which then it flips. Targets the rearmost unit, that's fine. Inflicts 6 bind next turn. So this is another controller like the Roseate Desire. So that's why I like it also, because the situation may come where we need to slow someone down. And then we can wail at him and choose what moves to clash. It's just something to take note of in the future. Bind did have some use in the Library of Ruina on very fast enemies, because they will go so fast and they only target one of your units. And it was very problematic because your units could not clash those moves because they were too fast, and then your one guy would have to eat all of that damage. So Bind did have a use at some point in Ruina. So I feel like it will have a use as well in Limbus. They just need to design the same enemies. Okay, now that I've talked about all the good value ones, let's move on to the very good value ones. We got Fluid Sac, Rime Shank, 4th Match Flame, Yisung, 2 Pathos Mathos, Impending Day, Ardor Blossom Star, Pursuance, Land of Illusion, where the hell are you, Land of Illusion, there you are. Telepole Heathcliff, and lastly 4th Match Rodion. Okay, so why are these egos here is because they provide a lot of stuff for the cost. It's some, I would say some of these are a bit situational, a bit of cope, but actually when you bring them for the situations where they're good at, they're actually not so bad. So I did put them up here. Let's talk about the Fluid Sac, because we were talking about Fluid Sac just now, right? The egos. Yeah, so this will be the last of Faust egos. Actually, no, we forgot to talk about representation emitter, but I put Fluid Sac first. So Fluid Sac, right, is really strong because it targets 5 slots. And yeah, AoEs just have huge value. You can bring this for Guido, N-Corps, anything, the roaches even, if you can somehow farm this energy. The energy is quite expensive though. It is 7, 8, 9. Yeah, 9 cost in total, so it's pretty expensive. And you sometimes don't even want to get this heal 15 SP or heal all allies for 15% max HP. Sometimes you don't even mind corroding just so you can deal the SP damage and attack down. Like this ego has a lot of stuff going for it, but the problem is that it's very defensive. It's not very offensive. Ebony Stem is an example of a very offensive 5 target AoE move. Unfortunately, Fluid Sac is more defensive than anything, so it doesn't go any higher. In this dungeon, there were some situations, in this Reflection Railway, there were some situations where this was very strong. You can hit 5 enemies with blunt weakness and you do a crazy amount of damage. And that is just really good, right? When you get those situations, 5 AoE here is really high value. But at the same time, when you fight a boss that resists blunt, then this is kind of whatever. And furthermore, the fact that this is a defensive ego is sometimes nice, sometimes not so nice. Because if you're all full, like, you don't need this. And if you're empty, then you're like, yes, thank you. Right? So yeah. The thing about Railway is that most of the time you won't be... You normally should not be dying in Railway. Like, your units can go really low, 50% and lower, but you usually have some sort of healing method, like Gregor, base Gregor passive, G Gregor passive, Chef Gregor passive, or another ego that heals. Maybe Impending Day also. Impending Day is much cheaper than this, so you can get a healing source from that. Or you can use Representation Emitter for the 15 SP also, that's pretty good. So most of the situations, it's really hard to justify like using this, but in the situations where there are actually 5 enemies weak to blunt or gloom, I would launch this for sure. So that's why I like this ego. Anyway, moving on to Rime Shank. Rime Shank is quite good actually. It's a little bit of hope, but the fact that it's AoE does let me justify putting it quite high. So the good thing about Rime Shank is that it is 15 plus 15, so 30 damage in an AoE, 3 targets. Not like Fluid Sac, but 30 damage in a 3 target AoE, that's 90 damage. That's pretty damn good, right? If the target's HP is below 50, you get plus 30%. It's like what is cast. Really good actually. This is a really good ego because it has a lot of damage. Burst Tremor, Inflict 3 Sinking Count. Sure, whatever. Currently Tremor, we got nothing on it. Plus 3 Sinking Count is actually a future archetype that I hope will be added on, because this ego has coldness. On hit, if the target has 5 plus sinking, you inflict 1 bind and attack down. I feel like there might be a situation in the future where a boss could benefit, because if we stack a bunch of sinking on the boss, we can use Rime Shank to apply the bind and attack down to control it. This is hoping, right, that in the future there actually is a need for binding and CCing the boss, because right now there is no situation where we need to do it. It's more about killing, right? It's all about killing, getting low turns, killing enemies fast so we can auto our dungeons. So I'm really hoping that they add something that will require some statuses that are for more CC, because then this ego here will definitely rise in value. But in terms of just damage, right? 30 damage in a 3 slot AoE with this passive here is already enough to justify it being here. But this extra stuff here, not so important for now. Yeah, for now. Okay, 4th match Flame Isang. Let's go to that one. 4th match Flame Isang. Here you are. So this one is actually surprisingly okay. 3 AoE, 4 burn, and 20 damage. That is about 60 damage, pretty good. Especially for the K-Corp. The K-Corp were weak to Wrath and Pride, so this was really strong because they were also weak to Slash. Yeah, really, really good. It costs quite a bit, 7 cost AoE, but you know, not everyone can be Legerdemain, otherwise the game would be broken. On Clash Win, inflict burn by Wrath Resonance, sure, why not, that's fine. And then you can also corrode it to get this and whatever really. Like, this is probably one of the most generic egos in the game. It just does the job when the enemies are weak to this typing. It's just nice. There's nothing special about this one. Yeah, so yeah, pretty simple actually to explain this guy. If the typings are right, just bring AoE, good enough. Alright, then to Pathos Mathos. To Pathos Mathos. I think everyone knows this ego as the Odyssey has a purpose, and it surely does. Tactical Profession is a really good passive. If the unit did not get hit at all, you gain damage up. Free. Pride and Sloth. Base Otis generates both, so free. If target's HP is below 50%, deal 30% more damage. Free. High base power. Free. On hit, inflict 4 rupture. This ego, right, is giving way more than it costs. So it's super strong, this ego. And the fact that base Otis fully funds this is also really good. So yeah, remember how I talked about how Sloth and Pride were pretty valuable resources? Well, yeah, 2 Pathos Mathos also uses those resources. So that's why it's hard to justify using on these resources on others. Because 2 Pathos, you activate once, right? And you're kind of okay, right? You get this 1 damage up for the rest of the game. It's pretty good. Yeah, so honestly solid. The Odyssey does have a purpose, and it's about killing people. Alright, next is Impending Day. Impending Day is quite amazing nowadays. So Impending Day rose in value because mainly of Sinclair's existence. The thing about Sinclair, right, is that if you corrode, you kind of want to be using this one. If the target's HP is below 25%, you deal 25% damage, and if you fail the kill, you gain 3 attack power up next turn, which allows Sinclair to do some crazy bonking shenanigans. Do you know that if you give him more actions, this stacks? Yeah, so if you somehow manage to not kill your friends, or if your friends can live with 1 HP, you have 6, 9, or 12 attack power up, depending on how many people you brought. It's actually insane, this ego. When you can get the corroded version. And if you use the base one, it's also fine. It's a heal, it gives you attack power up when you kill something, and it also has the execution passive. So overall, pretty damn good. The passive is the one that's a bit sus. I think we talked about using Impending Date for farming, but turns out we would never actually do that because we were trying to low turn count at the start of the railway. Yeah, we were trying to do, I think, 6 turns using something like Ting Tang, Sinclair, Faust, and all the other good blunt characters. We're trying to get some snowball effect with Mutilate, I think. Yeah, there were some strats along those lines. So generally, we never did any farming using this passive, and because of that, I also, yeah, it's just really good. Like, this passive is nice if you can get it, but it's not like the important part. The important part is that Sinclair benefits from these guys a lot, so you would use this with Sinclair. Yeah, in most other situations, you would just pop this just to kill someone and heal. Yeah, it's just good, right? It's just good. It's free healing. Only costs 5, by the way. It only costs 5. Thefts are usually 6, but this one costs 5. Okay, next is Ardor Blossom Star. Ardor Blossom Star is phenomenal. I love this ego. I want a Xiao ID. Okay, I can take Lowell ID too, I don't mind. Just give me something with burn, alright? Because this ego is just waiting here for something to happen. Shower of Fire passive. On hit, if target had burn, inflict 1 burn on 3 random enemies. This is kind of a great, honestly. It's just spreading burn to other enemies. I don't know if it will spread to the person that you hit. For example, if you were hitting a boss, right, would it stack this burn on, like, will it be 1, 2, 3? Or will it be just 1? Or will it be none? Like, how many burn will apply if you hit the target with burn? Yeah, I do not know, so I cannot talk about this too much, but it's just nice to have this passive. Then we look at the damage and it's like, whoo, 19 plus 22, that is 41 damage. 41 damage. Whoo! That's a shit ton of damage. This is probably one of my favorite eagles just because it has such a huge number here. It's like, whoo! If the enemy weak to Pierce and Wrath, boom, baby. It does have the weird one where it targets the rearmost unit. It raises the stagger threshold, which is great. Inflicts burn by Wrath Resonance and inflicts 3 burn on 3 random enemies. So yeah, it has a lot going for it for a cost of 7. And if you were to corrode this, well, it's kind of alright. It's not super amazing when corroded. The base form is already good enough. Yeah. This star is just waiting for a burn Ishmael. And then now that I talk about this ego, right? We're getting the bull ego for Ishmael too, and that one looks like burn. So why are they releasing more burn? Just give Ardor Blossom Star an ID that will benefit from it, please. I don't want it to sit here and just be sleeping on this huge amount of damage. I want it to be good. I want it to have a home. Okay, whatever. That's just Ardor Blossom Star is an ego that has a shit ton of damage. If you have the resources, you wouldn't mind popping this if the enemy is weak to this, because that is a crap ton of damage. You do have to take note of the targeting though. Yeah, you do have to take note of that. Okay, next is Pursuance. Pursuance is just solid. Pursuance is Sloth Gloom Pride for 7 costs. After winning a clash, you apply 1 attack power to random ally next turn. I don't even talk about this one because I will probably never do defending unless I have to. Shield 2 other allies with the least HP for 30% and then apply 2 protection, and then you burst Tremor with a damage of 26 plus 8. That is 34 damage. So 34 damage for healing. I mean, like, even if without the healing, if the enemy was weak to this or both, that's a lot of damage. That's like 90, 100. If enemy was weakened, right, this would be already times 2, so it would be about 60, 70-ish damage already. And it has burst tremor too, so it's really nice. And then if you corroded this, it targets 3 slots. And you unfortunately apply Fragile to an ally with the least HP, but you also apply 3 damage up. So this is actually just phenomenal ego, corroded and uncorroded. So just really solid, very good. It's not a healing one. Like, okay, the healing is nice, but the damage is there, so it's fine to justify it. It's the same as Fluid Sac. Fluid Sac has the damage if there's 5 targets, and this one is just I have the damage and I have heal on top of the damage, so it's good. Alright, simple enough, and then we go to Land of Illusion. Land of Illusion I actually want to put a little bit higher when I think about it, because it's AoE. So it doesn't have what Rime Shank has. It's 15 plus 10, and it costs 6. 6 is quite expensive. It's about standard for a Zane AoE. In that case, you might even argue like, why not pay 2 more for Rime Shank for the damage? Okay, I guess with that logic, then yeah. I think I would push him a little bit up here maybe, but on the low end. So the thing about this is that if you have 3 targets and they're weak to Blunt or Gloom, this is just free extra damage. Heal 15 SP, inflict 5 sinking for 6 costs. Passive is something that you can just ignore really. It's like, okay, I heal SP, sure, whatever. The problem is that it does cost a lot of Gloom, and Gloom is quite tricky with some team comps, so yeah. I think that this ego is just fine. It's fine. It does 25 in an AoE, 3 target, pretty good. Decent. Moving on to Telepole. Actually, Telepole should be here as well, my bad. So Telepole is actually more on the expensive side for some things, for an element that really doesn't matter to it. So Telepole Heathcliff, after defeating an enemy, you gain charge by half that turn's Envy Resonance. It costs 8 energy for target 3 slot and requires you to be Tails. The thing is that we don't have it yet, but 3 AoE for 33, yeah, that's pretty good. Assuming you don't roll this. The problem is that the ID doesn't exist where we can lower his sanity. Really tricky, not gonna lie. And also, we don't have any charge IDs. We do have Rabbit Heathcliff, who benefits a little bit from charge, but it doesn't really justify us spending the resources for body sack on this. This is 1 body sack count. Actually, it might even be 2, because body sack refunds you 1 envy. No, it's 1. It's just this is 1 body sack energy plus 3 ref. So currently it's not worth the energy. We don't have the negative ID yet that will benefit from this. We don't have the charge count ID that will benefit from this. So currently this ID is lacking a home, but it does have pretty decent damage if it can hit this 33 power on the 3 slots. Yeah, so really not too bad. AoEs are really, really good. Like I said, this one just happens to not have a home, and it's sometimes really hard for Heathcliff to actually get the negative coin here. Yep. So after that, we talk about 4th Match Flame Rodion. 4th Match Flame Rodion is I'm a bit on the fence. I don't know if you can justify the corrosion. So here's the thing about this ego, right? Is that the passive is whatever. After defeating an enemy, you get burned. That has burn. You heal by the max HP, whatever. It costs 6 energy. Not bad. 6 energy, and you inflict Wrath Fragility. Now that's the one, right, that I am very interested in, because this ego is designed for a negative coin ID, and if you apply this hit, you get 3 Wrath Fragility next turn, which lets you set up next turn for all the Wrath skills to be fired at the same time. The question is, like, we don't really have okay, we kind of do have the decent Wrath IDs. We have Gregor, Liu Hong, and Massault. Those guys play a lot of Wrath, so this is actually quite beneficial for that kind of team. Oh wait, now that I think about it, Sinclair has his skill tree that also does Wrath, so this Wrath Fragility actually has quite a lot of power on it, not gonna lie. Then Rodion also, actually, now that I think about it, and Rodion's skill tree is also Wrath. So yeah, there's actually quite a few skills already that do this. I think just a few more Wrath IDs will make this one really good. And furthermore, if you corrode, right, you get target 3 slots, target randomly, and you inflict Wrath Fragility on all 3 targets. Like, there's potential here, you know, there's potential. Like, maybe you ego this into Yi Sang's AoE ego, and you hit all 3 of them somehow. That's quite expensive though when I think about it. Quite expensive. Maybe it's just better for bossing, because you apply the Wrath Fragility on the boss and then you just wail at him with all the Wrath moves. So I feel like it has potential, because 3 Wrath Fragility is nothing to sneeze at. It's like how 3 Slash Fragility is also nothing to sneeze at. Yeah, it's really quite good, really quite good. Of course, basic Fragility is great, but if you can stack Wrath Fragility on top of it, then, you know, even better, right? So this ego feels like has potential. Alright, anyway, I've talked about all of the very good value ones. Now I'm going to talk about 2 special ones close to my heart. Close Eye View and Chains of Others. So these 2 egos are my favorite egos when I was doing the F2P run. Basically, if I ever encountered an enemy where I had a huge amount of problem with, either because he hit me too hard or I'm too slow to clash him, I just use this one. Because Yi Sangs are generally very fast, so you just need to hit this 2 attack power down, boom, enemy doesn't have the clashing power, you get the haste here, and when you get hit by attack, this passive, like, you can just ignore this existence. You can just use this to just CC the boss, make sure the boss is no longer a threat to your team, and then you just win. So really good. And then we look at Chains of Others. Chains of Others, lore-wise, is actually pretty damn cool, because Massault takes elements from other places and then converts it into pride. And then his passive is called Refusal to Judge, so it's very prideful ego. I like the theme of this. In addition, you get this very strong effect of I inflict bind and I inflict attack power down, and I gain protection next turn. So this ego is just really good in controlling enemies that are really annoying for you. I use it to cheese Chroma, I use it to cheese the Alleyway Watchdog, because that fight was really stupid. Sometimes Alleyway Watchdog, I believe before he was nerfed, Alleyway Watchdog had a bug where he kept rolling hits. So before the nerf, right, I found that I kept losing, so I just brought this and I just chained him so that the dog will become slow and not be a threat, and then I just win all my clashes and I won. So yeah, really good ego for controlling. But once again, not always you want to be spamming this ego, because it's a drain on the resources here, and it doesn't provide huge amounts of damage. It's just nice for control. So these egos here belong in I'm struggling. I don't know the strat to beat this boss. I don't know how to fight this boss. I just want to unga bunga this boss. I want to like CC him a little bit, make it so that I can win rate everything. Yeah, these are the 2 egos for you. That's why I left them a lot. And now we go to the maybe amazing egos, which are Dimension, and Sinclair. So I talked about the 2 dimensions before, and I do have some new knowledge of Yisang's ego. So from what I understand, right, the calculation done in this ego here is that the rupture damage here, this part here, this deal bonus pride damage, actually takes into account the enemy's pride weakness when it does the calculation. So you would do all of this, and then you will multiply by the target's pride weakness. This is addition to the base roll. So let me explain this in Unga Bunga terms, okay? So you use this ego, you hit the enemy weak to pierce, enemy weak to pride. So you get the damage bonus times 2, right? So it becomes around somewhere around times 3. Aga, right? Aga. And then after that, we activate this deal bonus pride damage by the target's rupture, blah blah blah. The math for this one checks, and then you also take into account enemy's pride weakness, and then this does additional damage if the enemy is weak to pride. So you are double dipping on the pride. So this ego is actually pretty monstrous for pride stuff. If enemy is weak to pride, you probably want to bring this ego and send him. Yeah, it's really good actually. So besides that interesting math calculation, I want to say that 38 is very respectable for a 6 cost. And at the start of the turn, if the unit took no damage, you gain charge count. So that's how you get your charge count here to get the extra damage. And then after successfully hitting enemy with lower speed, you inflict +1 rupture count. So +1 rupture count is quite significant because if you had none, right? Actually, I think you need 1. I think you need a minimum of 1 rupture count. Is it? No. Okay. I think, okay, so I'm not sure on this passive right now, but I think from the wording is that as long as you are hitting an enemy with lower speed, and your move does not apply rupture count, you apply 1 rupture count. So what that means, right, is that if, assuming you have 2 rupture count, you hit the enemy once, you consume the rupture count, and then you add it back. And then you do it 3 times per turn. And if you had +1 rupture count, then it becomes +2 application. So what happens is that 2 rupture count on the enemy becomes 3, becomes 4. Because you consume 1, you give back 2. Yeah, so it's ++. So yeah, this is actually a really good passive. If we can get an ID that does help us with the rupture count, or we just get a good Yisang ID that does a bunch of damage, then we can actually use this to great effect. Yeah, besides that, this ego, I have nothing much else to say. This part is really interesting because if you corrode, right, you apply the rupture and then you pop the rupture immediately afterwards. And the numbers are great. So I think that this ego will be used for killing enemies that are weak to pride. If the enemy is weak to pride, this ego will probably be used in a speedrun somehow. Yeah. So just keep this ego in mind. I rate it really highly. Then we move on to Honglu's. Honglu's ego, Dimension Shredder. When you hit an enemy with a negative status, you get 1 charge count. This is not very hard because Ting Tang can shank up to 4 times and Cloud Cutter up to 4 times. So it's actually not too bad. Hopefully we'll get ID also that applies rupture, and then we can see some hilariously OP Honglu. Honglu has what? Like 3 of the best IDs in the game. He has base ID, KK Honglu, and TT Honglu. Like, this man just keeps winning. Liu Honglu is kind of alright. We need to see the burn synergy in the future before we can talk about it. But right now, like, this is clearly the Honglu just keeps winning. That's all I can say. The thing about this ego that I like the most is that when you corrode and you have enough charge, you inflict +2 fragile and dimension rift. I feel like if you get an ID that goes along with this, we can inflict 3 fragility on an enemy, and that is nothing to sneeze at because we just paid this amount of resource, we corroded for 34 damage, and we apply fragility, and then we got our Rabbit Heathcliff, we got our, I don't know, Ishmael or something, and then we got Sinclair, TT Honglu, whatever other damage sources, just pile on the fragility. So I feel like this has potential for sure. And I really like the idea of Rupture finally getting some support. These egos seem super synergistic. They both apply Dimensional Rift to allow you to stack even more Rupture, and it gives Rupture count. So it's really important because we currently don't have a good source of Rupture count. I'm sure the IDs will be coming. Rupture value though, the potency, is something that we do have quite a few sources of. And then I can't wait to see Gregor finally use Eviscerate to benefit from this additional rupture. Yep. I don't know. But I feel like these two egos here have huge amounts of potential, so I put them here and maybe amazing. And then after that we look at Lifetime Stew. Lifetime Stew is... Lifetime Stew is a bit of me coping. So why I put it up here, right, is that this ego lets you do this. Tail coins inflict 1 burn if hitting enemy, which is very free now when we have Sinclair. What I'm mostly looking at here is this ego resource amp that you can give to your allies. So this means you double the amount of ego resources earned from skills by the effects count. And because of that, you'll be able to farm quite a bit of resources. And then the issue here is that you need to spend these resources to get back these resources, so this probably isn't enough. But Ego Resource Amp is an interesting status. I feel like they will add some sort of support to give us more counts of this. And with that, we will be able to do some crazy Ego Resource farming strats at the start of Mirror Dungeon or Refraction Railway, and then we can bring it all to the end, you know. The problem here is that this might be too hopeful thinking. Impending Day, right, also has the same passive, but we never really use it for farming either because there's no time. We are trying to low turn everything, so we probably won't even be using this ego for this part. So this is me coping. I will say that if Sinclair corrodes, this AoE here is actually really strong because it cannot. It can target your allies as well, but it targets the units with the least HP. So if you're doing wave battles and Sinclair corrodes, this actually is quite a lot of damage onto the enemies if they are weak to these elements. So that's a little bit of copium again for me. I feel like in general, generic content, you would probably run Impending Day. But there is a use case where if you can purposely corrode your Sinclair, you can just obliterate waves of enemies that are low HP. Lower HP than your guys, of course. You want to try and give Sinclair as much actions as possible for this strat to work. Might be too much setup. That's very cope, yeah. That sounds like a very optimal, optimistic. A very optimistic setup. But I feel like someone can do it. I feel like someone can just corrode this and just let all of the enemies cook. I feel like there might be a strat. Maybe something like you use Chef Gregor and Chef Ryoshu to heal up Sinclair solo, and you just keep wailing away until you can corrode yourself with Sinclair, which is not too hard, and then you just unleash Lifetime Stew corrosion on all of the enemies in front of you. Something like that. It's impractical now. There's no content, I think, where we can actually do this because Sinclair will probably just die. But in the future, I have some small semblance of hope for this. Okay, so after talking about these three, let's talk about the gods, right? Wait, whoops, I forgot to talk about Wishing Cairn. Wishing Cairn goes into here. Yep, so Wishing Cairn is a good one. Sorry about that. Wishing Cairn will be good because it's not exactly a DPS ego. Like 22 plus 4 is fine, and it costs 5, but it also just gives you tankiness against Blunt and Sloth. The thing about this Blunt and Sloth protection is that I think most of his IDs don't actually have like blunt resistance. It's either weak to blunt or normal to blunt, so there's nothing particularly interesting about this. There's no way we can either like taunt the move to us. I don't know. I feel like they made this ego for a reason, and there might be content in the future where this is going to be useful. But in that situation, right, like, why would we not just kill him? This is once again hope that there will be content where we need to CC the enemies, in which case then this 2 sloth fragility is good. The 3 paralyze is nice. Targets the rearmost unit is also a bit weird. I don't know. This ego is like one of my most conflicting egos. That's why I think I left it for last and I forgot to talk about it. This ego, if you corrode it, right, it targets 3 slots and inflicts Frag, Para, and Bind. But like once again, it's almost a full utility ego, and I don't like utility in the current state of the game. It's not enough damage to justify this utility, you see. If you talk about Sunyata or Hex Nail, then those guys actually apply quite a bit of fragility and have some interesting passives, or apply attack buffs, or apply way more fragility than this. So this ego, I mean, to sloth fragility, maybe if you're running a full sloth team, I don't know. I don't like this ego too much, but I think that the base power is higher and you are getting value for the future. So once again, another hopium placement here for this good value area. Yeah, okay, so now let's get back to the amazing ones. I feel like these are the egos that I need to talk about the least. So these egos, I'm going to just quickly go through them and explain things with Unga Bunga language. So representation emitter, skill power up, heal SP, 3 AoE, Unga Bunga, body sack. Body sack. When ally defeat enemy, gain attack power, gain haste for fragile. Doesn't matter, you won't be losing your clash. Very cheap. Gain 1 attack power next turn. Gain 3 haste next turn. Rabbit Heathcliff exists. Rabbit Heathcliff. 6 speed. 6 speed. Wow, OP. Yep. Next, Ryoshu. Ryoshu, every 4th skill, use gain 4 final power, inflict 4 burn with each of his attacks. We have IH and I can cook anything on Chef Ryoshu. Kind of busted if you can get to that 4th attack. I did my solo run with this ego as well. Every 4th attack I would do something like I can cook so that I can activate all of this for huge amounts of damage. And then does 21 plus 16, that's 37 is pretty respectable. Skill power plus 2, on kill gain 2 attack power, got lots of shit going for it, incredible amounts of shit going for it, very very strong. I use this with Chef Ryoshu for maximum damage, and Chef Ryoshu provides the ref, the pride needs to come from somewhere else. Ebony Stem, haha, overclock, kill everything. Very very expensive, 10, but very very strong. At start of turn, gain 1 pierce. On hit with hate coin, plus 1 rupture count, plus 1 bind. What? Okay. And then AoE 5 slot, wow, 22, plus 7, 29 damage, 5 slot AoE, wow. Rupture, bleed, gluttony, fragility, yo. Corroded, 29 plus 7, inflict 5 rupture, 5 bleed, 3 gluttony, fragility. Ah shit, okay, it's busted. Okay, Legerdemain. Legerdemain. On hit, inflict 5 maggots. Okay, free. Free damage. 4 cost. 4 cost for 3 AoE. The only one of its kind. Zayn. AoE target 3 cost. 18 plus 5. 23, not bad. Burst Tremor, Inflict Paralyze, sure, whatever. Corroded version, about the same. It's just cheap, maggots, good damage. Blunt. Very good for a lot of content in Railway right now. Last one, Telepole Don. Telepole Don. At start of combat phase, random ally with charge gains blah 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 charge count. Sometimes good, sometimes happen, sometimes no happen, whatever. 18 plus 8, 26. Pretty good. Gain plus 10 charge count. Wow, W Don, go insane. Hit, give charge count to all allies by NV resonance. Okay, sometimes happen, sometimes don't happen. Who cares? This one is okay. If you run full charge count characters, then sure, this is pretty good also. But this one, give yourself 10 charge count. Hey, W Don likes charge count. Right, W Don, rip space, charge count, plus 4 coin power. Coin power equal busted. 5 coin, 5, 20, 31 damage in total. Enemy weak to NV and slash, GG, easy. Okay, there, I explained every single top tier ego. Basically, if it helps you to clear shit really fast, has good costings, or just helps you to kill shit really fast, which is the most important part, then it's top tier. That's why these 6 egos here were some of the more used egos for Railway Dungeoning. I think Representation Emitter might be the only one that wasn't super used, because you would rather use the Pride resources for Ebony Stem. So in that situation, you might throw this down here or something, but still pretty good, you know. Plus 2 clashing for SP generation and then 3 AoE, pretty damn good. Maybe I'll just throw it down here. Okay, if we were to organize this, it would be something along the lines of these two being probably very equal. Actually no, Ebony Stem number 1, and then Legerdemain number 1, and then 4th Match Flame, and then representation emitter will be somewhere around here maybe. Fourth match flame will be around here. But like I said, right, for these guys, if I were to organize them like this, right, you would totally say like, oh, but Legerdemain is so insane, it's for 4 costs, and then, oh, but Ebony Stem is also insane, it's a 5 cost, sorry, the 10 cost with a 5 AoE. So it's really hard to say like, oh, this ego is amazing, this ego is amazing, because situations where they're good at, they're really, really good at for these guys. So it's really hard to just organize them left to right. In this situation, I would say probably don't even look at them as ordered left to right, because these guys are all great. These are all some of the best egos in our game currently because of the synergy. If they belong to a good ID, right, that's the most important part. So you notice like Telepole Heathcliff, Rime Shank and Fluid Sac Don, they don't have the right IDs to go with. Ardor Blossom Star, I wish for a burn ID. I wish for a burn ID. Then I can finally have a home for this one. I can throw up here because it synergizes. But yeah, as you can see, like these egos have clear synergies, either very low cost, very high damage. That's why they are some of the most dominating egos in the game. Fragility from egos has been very split. I think most people don't use fragility sources from egos. They instead just reroll their Rabbit Heathcliffs or reroll their Ishmaels to get the fragility source. So egos with fragility maybe won't be used as well for Refraction Railway. It's just something that I personally think has potential, because maybe your team comp just happens to generate that energy, and then with that energy you'll be able to occasionally activate this Honglu ego or activate this Hex Nail ego. Especially when you run someone like all the Envy gang, maybe like anyone with an Envy skill, you can maybe generate a lot of resources to just Hex Nail every now and then to apply even more fragility. So yeah, I mean, fragility is such an important status in our current meta, where we bring to Railway, we will just run the fragility characters, we will reroll until we get the max fragility apply on the enemy, and then we burst them down. So yeah, fragility is very dominating. It's just that fragility in egos is a bit of a mixed point. Dimension Cutter Honglu, Dimension Shredder Honglu might be rated too highly because of the fragility, but at the same time, you can't say that the rest of his the rest of the stuff that he gives for his cost is bad, because it's actually quite good. I mean, he gives target Realmos, whatever, gain charge count, fragility, dimensional rift, so it's supporting the rupture count stuff. And it has a really nice passive. When you hit an enemy with negative status effects, and I think negative status means like anything, it can be fragile, dimensional rift, rupture, tremor. I think all of these count as negative, so you will gain charge count pretty easily. So we just need to wait for the ID. These egos just need an ID to make them amazing. Please, ID, don't be garbage. If it's like W Don, sorry, not W Don, W Faust and Telepole Faust again, I'm gonna be so sad, because those two could have been amazing if the W Faust was a bit better. I don't know. Maybe there could be a demand for the debuffs that W Faust applies. Like maybe we want binding, maybe we want attack power down, inflict 3 paralyze. This is not a paralyzed external, not very good. I don't know, maybe just for binding. Oh, so copium. It's so copium, man. I can't justify this one. This is one of the this ego is not even bad. It's not even bad. It's just bad ID. Well, there could be hope in the future. Could be hope. So anyway, that is it for this video. Leave your comments on whether I put anything wrong, whether I rated anyone too highly. I think the ones that might be the most sus placements, right, would be like Lifetime Sinclair, because honestly, we probably won't be doing ego resource farming or anything along those lines, but still, like, I can hope, right? For generic use, definitely would put this guy above him, but I have some cope here. If this is the one, then I would just show him like maybe here or here. Like maybe that's too much. Maybe I rate him too highly, because an ego all about healing and not about damage is not super useful in our current meta. Yeah, but besides that, I really can't see any other guy that is rated too high or too low. I just yeah, I can't really see it. I've already looked at everything quite thoroughly. So if you have any weird placement changes, sorry, not weird, any placement changes, then just let me know and give an explanation, and I'll just take a look. Because I really, it's really hard to rate these, but it's quite fun to figure out which ones goes where. Yeah. So that's it for this video. Thank you all for watching.